Welcome, Professor Dr. Johann Rinhofer, to our podcast, The Hydrogen Leader. I'm delighted to have you here.
Thank you very much, Björn.
As you know, with this format, we try to share insights into interesting industries in the hydrogen industry, also share leadership secrets and how people became so successful. You are a very important person in the hydrogen economy because you're leading the activities of ThyssenKrupp Nucera in Australia. We will come to that in a minute. But before we go into business, I would like to ask you, who is Johann Rinhofer?
Who is Johann Rinhofer? Good question. So I grew up in Styria, beautiful Styria, as a country boy, basically, in a farm environment, in an area where they mine iron ore since more than 1,000 years. And I started to ski when I was 2. So skiing area, it's a beautiful part of the world. And I'm also an engineer. I'm a business leader. I have experience in building industrial plants on 5 continents.
Wow.
So I'm a doer. I'm a guy who has really done it. And I think I'm also an enabler. I am an educator and innovator, not only in the companies which I was working for and the people I was leading, but also at universities and just get people thinking and helping them solving problems and using tools, understanding complex issues, and I think that's me.
It's very interesting. And is that also what drives you to lead people, or what are you passionate about?
I'm passionate about the laws and the science of thermodynamics,
Okay.
the fundamental basics of energy. I'm passionate about metals, especially when they are glowing or liquid,
Yeah.
and working with those metals and designing them, making them real, so to say. I'm also interested in history and the patterns of human behavior, which is the basics of politics, basically. And it's good to understand how people think. And I think passionate about also making a contribution to the future world in which we are living. Because when I was
contribution.
Yeah, absolutely a good contribution. Because when I was a little boy in Styria, I saw still steam locomotives dragging and towing steel from one part of the rolling mill to the other part. And so that's approximately 60 years back. No? And now I'm then I built industrial furnaces for 20 years. Most of them were based on fossil fuels. And now we are at the crossroads, basically. We are electrifying processes. We are looking at hydrogen, where it is viable to drive processes. So this is a very interesting and also inspiring
So to be
thing.
part of the change.
To be part of this change and making a contribution as an engineer and also as a leader.
Yeah. Speaking about leadership, I noticed from your LinkedIn profile that you had quite a prominent career in 8 companies. And what I found interesting is that in 7 of them, you had the role of the CEO. And normally you have this ladder career. Is this the way for you, Johann, to be the top leader in a company always? Do you have to be a CEO to lead people?
No, I mean, I don't think that a higher force determines me to be a CEO. I think that's a bit too far. There are other people who have this opinion,
Yes, I
probably. I don't have this opinion. But I mean, certainly, I was lucky when I was a young fellow at the age of 30. I was given the opportunity to be a CEO and also a CEO in Australia, actually.
Yeah.
An Australian company. And so I was lucky that somebody had the trust in me, that I am competent enough, that I'm from my the way how I work and how I deal with people and my surrounding world that I can do this job. So they threw me into the cold water, and I could swim, and I'm still swimming.
Yeah. And what do you think is the foundation of a great CEO? What makes a great CEO in your view?
I think a great CEO should be honest. He should be competent. He should be able to communicate with his people and also to understand his people and what the orders he is giving, what they mean to the people. This is like a general who was in the trenches, and he knows what he's talking about when he asks somebody to do something. So I think the holistic understanding of the business is very important, and also I think it's important to be visionary. But not too visionary, because when you're starting to be visionary and people think you are on a medication, that can be very dangerous. And as a matter of fact, I was employed for a period of 15 years of my career to restructure companies and also to turn around companies. And I saw this pattern happen in all these companies. So there were always guys
Too
there.
visionary.
They were too visionary or not visionary at all.
Yeah.
That's the opposite. That also can happen. But in any case, I think you have to be down to earth. You have to relate to people, understand what you're talking about, and being open to relate to people.
Yeah, so oftentimes a vision comes with a lot of change. And I think the hard part for a leader is to manage the change without losing the people. And what do you think is a good time frame of a vision? Because oftentimes people think about, in the next 20 years we should achieve this, but it's probably too long. What is your experience? What is a good target which is far away to really have the chance to drive change, but close enough to still keep the people motivated? Do you have experience in that?
I think that's very much depending on the actual situation of a company. I mean, if you have some immediate problems which you have to solve, you don't have too much time to think about the period of the next 10 years or the next 20 years. So you have to solve immediate problems. And that can be quite challenging. No? And also here people, I think they respect very much when you are consequent, when you are, even in difficult situations, lead the way. For a more general approach, I think a period of 10 years is something which people can oversee and also accept as the future. Because when you talk about too far a distance in the future, nobody takes you serious in the end, because nobody knows what's happening in 2060 or 2050.
Yeah, got it. I personally think that one of the big challenges of a CEO is that you are expected to deliver results, even in a complex setting. And as you have been very successful as a CEO, you must have a great ability to achieve more or less results. You cannot guarantee those results, but the people expect it from you, that you can achieve that. Do you have some secrets that you can share how you achieve these business goals, despite not knowing when you commit that you can do it?
I mean, managing uncertainty is part of the game, so to say. Very important topic. So you have to be like Karl von Clausewitz, an old strategist, said once, the strategy is the economy of forces. So you have to be able to judge what can you do, what are you able to do, so to say, with this company and with these people in a certain environment, in a certain market, or with a certain technology. So this judgment is very important, I think. So you have to be able to not only look at headlines, you have to go into the material directly. You have to be able to challenge also people and having discussions, integrate people, and also motivate people by doing that.
And did you learn that all by yourself, because you mentioned throwing in the water, or do you also have other leaders that you look up to where you say, this was inspiring for me and I learned a lot from somebody?
I mean, there's no specific person I would say I learned something, but I learned a lot from seeing how people act, and some of them are good examples and some of them are bad examples. No? But definitely, I learned it on the job. That's right. So you cannot train that as a theoretical exercise, so to say. You have to do it. And I think the best thing is to be authentic and just do it.
Yeah. And do you have a last question on this CEO topic? A habit, how you perform or how you stay ahead of these developments? Because I think you need to stay curious also to see all these developments that could be relevant.
Definitely, man. You have to never stop learning. I think
Yes.
never close your eyes. You have to watch what is going on, and also be able to judge what people say, what media say, for example, and put it into a relation, so to say.
Separating the
Separating the
signal
good
from
from
the
the bad.
noise. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And stay grounded, I think. Always stay grounded, because I think it's very dangerous when once people start to live on LinkedIn or in other spheres which are not the real world. No?
Yeah, no, and
Nothing against LinkedIn.
I can prove that you are very grounded because we met, I think, in Rotterdam, and what impressed me that you were also very open to this idea of having this podcast and sharing this, because I learned that giving back is also a passion from you. We will talk back. Let's come now to ThyssenKrupp Nucera. I think ThyssenKrupp is a well-known global brand, known mainly for its steel activities, but ThyssenKrupp Nucera is somehow a business unit, or please explain the business of ThyssenKrupp Nucera.
So ThyssenKrupp Nucera is more than 50% owned by ThyssenKrupp, and is also listed on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. Our business is electrolysis, so we are the leading electrolyzer supplier in the world. We have two business segments. One is chlor-alkali business. So also chlorine gas is produced with electrolysis, and the other part is green hydrogen business, which is water electrolysis, basically.
Yes.
So our business is to build these plants. So we are technology supplier, and we have. Currently, we have more than 3 gigawatts of electrolyzers in execution, which is a lot.
Yeah,
So we are building the largest plants in the world in Saudi Arabia, NEOM, and also Stegra in Sweden, the green steel plant. So there's a lot happening on the ground.
And because many people say they are leading, but probably you are leading really, I think you are a $1 billion company with a lot of pre-orders and orders under construction. And I ask myself, how do you see the market? Because there is this green hydrogen development and a lot of predictions how the market developed from an inside view. Do you also see these predictions that there is a big demand for electrolyzers?
So first I have to state I'm not leading ThyssenKrupp Nucera.
Right.
I'm leading the ThyssenKrupp Nucera Australia, the subsidiary company.
Yes.
I mean, obviously there was a hype in hydrogen the last 2 or 3 years, which has it's a bit quiet in the moment because I think there's a selection of projects. Some will happen and other ones will disappear because there is no offtake or there's not enough renewable energy available for green to operate these electrolyzers. So for that reason, I think there's a selection of projects in the moment.
Right. And your technology, for those who are not engineers, what actually is an alkaline water electrolysis? Can you explain this shortly to us? And I think your products is basically for the big projects, right?
Exactly right, Björn. So our project is, I say, approximately 100 megawatt plus project. So industrial scale electrolyzer plants which are able to feed an ammonia plant or a steel plant or something like that. So it's not small, it's large. And the alkaline electrolysis is one of the most I would say, efficient and inexpensive ways how to produce green hydrogen compared with other technologies. It works basically in that way that we are splitting water into oxygen and hydrogen. We have to purify the water before it comes into the electrolyzer, and then we put some ions in there, which are able to conduct the current, because the electrons, so the current, the number of electrons per time unit which are flowing through the electrolyzer, they produce the hydrogen. So we have a very high current there, low voltage, and that produces the hydrogen. So we are producing hydrogen gas and oxygen gas from water, which is liquid.
Right. And you mentioned that you are leading the activities in Australia. Australia is far away, so we here in Europe don't know a lot about Australia. So why is Australia an important market for ThyssenKrupp nucera?
Australia is a country which is a Western country in the Indo-Pacific region. It is a very important country, also embedded in the diplomatic and military alliances of the West. And it is also a country, some say this is the quarry of the world, because Australia is the largest supplier of iron ore to the world.
Yes.
So more than 50% of the seaborne iron ore comes from Australia.
Yes.
It's very important. Australia is also the biggest lithium exporter of the world, and also I think the third largest LNG, so liquefied gas exporter of the world, and many other minerals. So it's a country of minerals, and this is why it is very important.
And are those industries also interested in hydrogen applications?
Absolutely. I mean, Australia has not only minerals in the ground, it has also sun and wind, an abundance of wind. And for that reason, it is a country which can lead the way in green ammonia production and also green iron production and also green methanol production for sustainable air fuel, for example. And for that reason, I think the world looks at Australia because it's in a very prominent position.
So bottom line is there are very energy intensive industries existing, but you have good situation with a lot of sun and wind. So it's a perfect setting to somehow generate green hydrogen and also decarbonize such energy demanding industries, right? That's why you are there, bottom line.
Correct. So we are working with all the large project developers there in Australia.
Yeah.
There is the option and also the vision for Australia, the opportunity for Australia to make green iron, for example. Because also Australia is not only interested to export iron ore to China, so 85% of the iron ore of the exports of Australia go to China actually. Yeah. So Australia is also interested in extending their value chain, not only for iron ore, but also for critical minerals and other minerals in order to keep the value-added processes in Australia. And a part of it is also green iron, because the conventional way how you make iron is with coal. That can be avoided by using hydrogen. So you don't get CO2. But you get water as the result of this process.
Before we come to Australia specifically, so I get it. The iron and the steel industry is one of your major customer groups. Do you have other customer groups that are relevant for your hydrogen business of ThyssenKrupp nucera?
Yeah, we are working with all large projects which are using hydrogen potentially. So it's
the application areas.
Exactly. So ammonia, methanol, and also steel or iron. So we are agnostic in that sense. So we are not focused on any one of them. But
okay, so bottom line is your business is project based, and whenever there is a chance to decarbonize an industry through let's say green hydrogen, then you have something to offer with your company, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And coming back to the role of Australia, because this is something I was not aware of before we were talking here. And you mentioned that Australia is the biggest exporter of um, iron ore. And for normal people like me, these terms are very specific. So there is iron ore, there is iron, and then there is steel. What actually is the difference?
So the iron ore is the mineral which is in the
Yes.
ground, basically. So it is basically oxidized iron, like rust.
Right?
This is why it is also red. And this is also why Australia is called the Red Continent, actually, because
Okay,
there's so
okay,
much
okay,
iron.
okay, yeah.
And so when you look at the iron ore, what do you have to do when you make iron? You have to remove the oxygen, and you have to remove the impurities which are in there,
Yes.
in the iron ore. So what you want is basically iron, and for that reason you have to take carbon or hydrogen just to take the oxygen away from the iron ore, and that happens usually in a blast furnace with coal, or in the new version is the DRI, or direct reducing of iron furnaces. They are using natural gas, or in the best case hydrogen,
Green hydrogen.
to the green hydrogen to remove the oxygen from the iron ore, and then you get iron. And the next step is to take this iron, which is a very soft material basically, and make steel from iron. That means you have to further oxidize elements in the iron, and also add some alloy metals to the iron to make steel. And there are more than 3,000, almost 3,500 types of steel available today. So it's a very differentiated product.
And Australia has this leading role in export in iron ore and in iron. But China is leading the steel export. Is that correct?
That's correct. The iron ore is the export product of Australia. So
Okay.
they don't export any iron yet,
Okay.
but the target is to make iron,
To increase the value
to
chain?
increase the value chain, so to say, in Australia. For that reason, we would build hydrogen plants there and iron plants there, make iron from iron ore in Australia, take this iron, ship it to the places in China or in Europe or in Japan or in Korea where the steel plants are, and they can use it to make steel there.
And are these markets very interested on those solutions, this greener iron?
The markets are interested, but they are all sort of waiting on legislation,
Okay.
basically. So there's no 100% clear or legislated definition what is green steel exactly. But that is required to set the metrics, so to say. What is green iron? So
And in your understanding, what would you say is green iron and green steel? I know a project from Sweden. I think it's H2 Green Steel.
Yeah.
They have this term in their name. How would you define that?
So there are very reasonable proposals which are made. They say it's depending on how you produce the steel. For example, via the blast furnace, you normally would create around more than 2 tons of CO2 for 1 ton of iron. And you can reduce this in the best case to less than 0.4 tons of CO2 for 1 ton of iron. When you use an electric arc furnace, which is basically melting scrap, so basically a secondary use of the steel which is already there, they can go down to almost 50 kilos of CO2 for 1 ton of steel in the end, because they are just remelting the scrap. You don't use a lot of reductant material for that.
So this means, in your vision, there must be a threshold of allowed CO2 in those products, because when we talk about green hydrogen, normally the people say it must be 100% produced by wind or solar. But in your understanding, green iron and green steel would still cannot be produced 100% green, but with a very reduced CO2 footprint. And we need a definition to make it tradable, that we don't compare apples with bananas, right?
Absolutely right, Björn. This is exactly the case. So you always need some carbon to produce a steel because it's in the steel. It's an alloy, basically an alloy element, but to set these metrics, this is exactly what the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, which is introduced in Europe in the next year, actually, 2026. Aims to facilitate, so to say. This is exactly, they want to set the rules, what is a green product and what is the carbon footprint of a certain product which you are importing into the European Union or which you produce in the European Union. And according to this carbon footprint, there's a price on CO2. And so that's the metrics basically we are talking about.
And that means you are waiting in Australia for European legislation to define more or less what is green iron and what is steel, because Europe would be the ones buying those products.
So there's not only Europe, but also, in essence, Japan and Korea,
right,
which are especially also interested in green iron. And also, obviously, Australians monitor the situation in China because they're also active in that area.
If they are your biggest customer.
Absolutely. So we have to look at them. And so that is obviously very important to set these legislative measures. And because in the end, the iron you produce or the steel you produce with hydrogen will be more expensive, between 30 or 50% approximately. It's depending on the situation. In comparison to a kind of gray steel or a normal steel.
So this 30 to 40% sounds quite big, but you think there is still some industry which could be the early market adopters for this green steel. Which industry do you have in mind?
So one has to say that the profitability of the steel plants is it's very tough for the steel plants actually. So they are under very much pressure. The room to move, so to say, and the margins, they are more on the iron making side. So the iron ore side, they are much more flexible, I would say, in that regard. No? And and when you talk about steel, margins are very low. It's a difficult industry to be in. So the global steel production is around 1.9 billion tons of steel, and half of it is produced in China. There's also very cheap Chinese steel going into other markets. It's exported into other markets. So just to give you an example, a ton of hot rolled coil, this is basically a flat rolled steel, it costs approximately $500 per ton from China. In the Western Europe, it's around 600. And in the US, in the moment, it is more than 800 because Mr. Trump was introducing this aluminum and steel taxes of more than 50%.
Right, yeah. So my uncle used to work in the trailer business and also purchased steel from China, and he always said that this was very professional. The testing things received, and he was quite impressed about the quality of the steel delivered to Europe. And if I understand, basically the problem for decarbonizing the supply chain, the steel supply chain, is that the steel manufacturers don't have a margin, the iron manufacturers don't have the margin. The margin is with the iron ore manufacturers. So bottom line, if we want to go green in the world, we need to find a way to incentivize the iron ore manufacturers to go green. Do you have some ideas? How can we do this? Or is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, man, this is one option, obviously. And the other option is to increase the prices of the steel in the end by the carbon, by the price on carbon. And this is exactly what's happening with the CBAM in the European Union.
Right.
So, but obviously the iron ore producers, they have not an immediate interest in reducing their margins. I think this is also why new companies are coming into this sphere of green steel and green iron, which are not the established players. So their business model is completely different.
Right. So if I would think I would buy a car which would be produced in green steel, that sounds pretty attractive to me. But I don't know how much more I would like to pay for this. Do you know whether there is a chance that we can buy a Mercedes based on green steel in the future?
I mean, I'm not speaking for the car manufacturers, obviously, but
for sure.
the cars, cars are a product which can be sold to an end customer,
Yes.
and certainly the share of the cost of green iron in a complete car is minor, so to say. So you would pay maybe around whatever 400, 500 euro more for a car which is made by green steel, depending on the size, because a car has only around 1 or 1.5 tons of steel.
Yeah.
So that's digestible, so to say, for a customer. If he wants to go green, he can buy these cars with a slight premium. But that would not most likely not happen as easily when you are selling construction steel, to companies who are building bridges or buildings or something like that. So that's a different story. So also the steel market is a very differentiated market.
Yeah.
And for that reason,
for those products, steel would be a high percentage of the
exactly
product.
Right. Yeah, so when you talk about whatever 70% share,
they are much more price sensitive.
Then they are much more price sensitive, and for that reason, that would not be the most attractive market for green steel.
Coming back to Australia and also the vision of the government a bit, because I think everybody understands we need steel for a lot of areas in our living and constructions and things like that. But it's still responsible for quite a lot, I guess, in the production of greenhouse gases. So do we know how important it would be to decarbonize this industry, and how visionary or targeted is the Australian government to lead also in that direction?
So the global steel industry emits approximately 7 to 8% of the global carbon emissions in total. So this is quite a lot. Cement is similar, the cement industry. Shipping is around 3% or 2%. So it's a lot.
It's a lot.
And, for that reason, it's a sort of the steel industry is a good target. If you want to reduce carbon emissions, you have to look at the steel industry. There's no doubt about it. And in Australia, obviously, we have a government which is the federal government is very supportive. Basically, there's huge funds available for green steel, but also another fund which is called the Future Made in Australia, which is billions of Australian dollars, which are designated to go into further processing of the ores which they are producing in Australia before you ship the product. So this is there's lots of ambitions there in the moment. Yeah.
And Australian government tries to change their country with incentives, not with regulation, or is it on top of that required at a certain point in time to produce green iron ore?
I mean, there's incentives, number one, but there's also a process in place which is aiming at the 200 largest emitters of carbon emissions in Australia. So they're also forced, similar to the CBAM actually, forced to reduce their carbon footprint. They call it the safeguard mechanism in Australia. But Australia is very unique, I think, in its position. It's a huge country, so it's as large as the USA approximately, with only 27 million people living there.
Only 27 million.
It's not a lot.
Oh, that's not a lot. Yeah.
I would say so. So that's North Rhine-Westphalia times 1.5 or so.
Yeah.
So there are certain challenges, obviously, there in Australia. The huge distances, also the lack of the downstream industries in Australia, they force to export goods into other countries. So that makes it very specific. It's not easy.
Yeah. Okay. Why is it not easy? Because of the size of the country or because of the change needed? Can you go a little bit deeper on that?
Number one, you're always dealing with importing countries, which are the off-takers of your product.
You mean the market is not
Yeah.
Australia, the market is outside.
Exactly, the market is outside.
Yeah.
And there are obviously also challenges internally to, for example, to have a gas grid or an electrical grid.
Yeah.
That's not spanning whole Australia. So this is just in certain areas,
Right.
because of the large distances. So it is. In that sense, it's really great, because you have an abundance of sun and wind, but to connect it, it's not so easy.
You mentioned that currently the hype is a little bit over on a green hydrogen, but there is still demand and interest, knowing that what you said, that the Australian government is very ambitious. Can you tell us a little bit about the production capacity needed for electrolyzers to decarbonize the steel industry or the iron industry in Australia? Do you have some insights here?
So I can give you any number on that, but I can tell you that there is ambitions to build green iron plants in Australia. So they say clearly we don't produce steel in Australia because we don't want to go into the business of our customers.
Okay.
So they say, okay, we make green iron in Australia, ship the product, which is called HBI, hot briquetted iron, which is a compressed form of
Learned a
iron,
lot.
to the steel plants. And so that's going on in the moment there. And I think that's just emerging in the moment.
Yeah. And I saw in the news that another group company of ThyssenKrupp, I think Material Trading, is potentially your off-taker. They would be interested to buy green iron. Can you tell us about the project, why this is important?
So there was an announcement on BGS. This is Progressive Green Solutions.
Yes.
That's a green iron project in Australia. It is in a very good position close to Geraldton, which is north of Perth. It has excellent wind and solar conditions there, and also an existing infrastructure like railways, like a mine, like a port. That's all there already. And ThyssenKrupp Materials Trading, they signed a memorandum of understanding for offtake of green iron, and they are obviously sure they can sell it.
And that is also part of your business, or you would provide the equipment for producing this?
So we are part of the supplier group of companies.
Right.
We are supplying technology. So we are not interested directly into the iron, but we would supply the electrolyzers to this plant. And there are other companies who would build the iron plant.
Right.
And so that's a very good combination.
Is this the first kind of its kind of project, or are there other projects? So bottom is, it's really happening. It's not only paperwork. We are doing this now, but are there other plants which can produce green steel or green iron already existing, or is it the first of its kind?
So this project in Australia is in the feasibility stage.
Okay.
They will start the FEED, so the front-end engineering, soon. And there are other projects of this kind in Sweden. There is Stegra.
Yeah.
Stegra is originally H2 Green Steel. They are building a plant in the northern part of Sweden, which entirely runs on hydrogen, and also with a shaft furnace to make iron from iron ore. And they also produce steel, actually, which is the product which you produce after producing iron, and sell it to the automotive manufacturers, and so that's already happening.
Yeah.
So we are just in the moment building 740 megawatt of electrolyzers there.
Yes, I saw the video.
It's also shared on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
and also on the homepage of Stegra. Very nice videos and reports about that. I really can recommend to look
Yeah,
at it.
it's very impressive. So what I get out of this, there is a sense of urgency that we need to move as a world because of the greenhouse gases produced, but it's not so easy to decarbonize the entire supply chain from the extraction of iron ore to the actual steel manufacturing and then including green steel into consumer product. Is that a fair summary?
It's a fair summary because in the end we are also talking not only about decarbonizing, we also talk about cost.
Yeah.
We talk about inflationary impacts, of increasing prices. We talk about different companies which are part of this value chain, which all have their own interests. So it is not as easy as it looks like. So technically it can be done. That's not a problem. The technologies are available. But obviously there's also a social impact and an economic impact of
and
this.
it's also very international business.
Yes.
So if we want to get this right, many countries have to work together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. This is also interesting and coming now to a little bit of outlook because you told me that you are very passionate also to be a lecturer, and you are doing this for many, many years. What type of lectures are you giving? You're from Austria, not from Australia, but you're now sharing insights also with many students. Please explain.
Yeah. So I started to give lectures actually for entrepreneurship and also for the theory and practice of industrial competition.
Yes.
Just to show how you deal with these challenges in practice. Huh?
Yeah.
But my real topic is high temperature engineering and industrial furnaces. So I'm lecturing this since more than 20 years at the University of Leoben in Austria.
Okay.
And I also gave some guest lectures at Australian universities on that topic in combination with hydrogen, in combination with electrification of processes. And where are the limits of these technologies and what are the options and challenges and how do you deal with this
and you're giving this not only in Austria but also doing lectures internationally, also in Australia, right?
Yeah, I gave some lectures on that topic in Australia as well. And so originally I thought I'm sort of giving something back to society when I do these lectures because I also had a very good education and had the benefit of being able to learn things. And I thought, I do this and I have to give a lot. No? Mm-hmm. But when I started to do these lectures, I also saw immediately that I receive a lot doing that because, to have a relationship with students and also see the glow in their eyes when they grasp something and how to use a tool, and to understanding things, complex things, and you help them to do that. That's also a very
and that is part of an engineering study, right? Where what type of students do you lecture?
Yeah, these are engineering students, mostly chemical engineers, mechanical engineers, metallurgists, and obviously also the economic impact is always a part of that.
And what type of questions are they asking you? Are they also requesting from you new solutions?
Very similar to your questions.
Okay. So that gives me the feeling that I'm still not too old. Thank you for that. No, I think I think what you said is very right. By sharing, you give to yourself, right?
Absolutely,
because I think if people help other people, this is the best thing you can do, and people notice this with all the noise.
Absolutely, and I think it is very important, and this is the kind of questions I also get back from the students. You have to stay grounded, you have to go back to the fundamentals of thermodynamics and also to the fundamentals of economics, because nothing
beats physics.
Exactly, it's very simple. That even is valid for anyone even if you don't believe in it. No? So that's very valid. That you always have to go back to the basics and then basically always build up the arguments, build up the solutions, and that is very, very nice. And that's the positive feedback I get.
And So from an outset and now knowing you a little bit better, I think you have achieved quite a lot in your life. You studied just like everybody. Now are an important CEO in an important industry, in addition to a professor. If you would give one or two advice to young professionals who would love to have a similar career like others, like you did, what would be the advice that you give to young professionals?
I mean, just grasp any opportunity which you receive, basically. So you have to be quick, in case don't think too much and too long, about
Take it with courage.
Just take it with courage,
Yeah.
Just go forward.
Yeah, and then you learn a lot.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, this has been great, Johan. I learned that we have a very grounded CEO who is passionate of giving back and has a very challenging task because of the complexity of the steel supply chain. I'm very confident. I got to know you through Mr. Professor Hebling, who I think is similar passionate like you. To give back and to help the world go green. Thank you for being here and thank you for sharing these insights far from Europe in Australia, but it matters because every steel product here in Europe, there is a high likelihood that the iron comes from Australia.
That's right, yeah. Thank you very much, Björn, for the invite, and it was good to discuss with you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks.